All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're getting in something pretty fundamental.
Yeah.
It's something that's really important for anyone who is involved with cranes.
Absolutely.
And, it might seem basic, but it's one of those things where if you don't get it right,
Yeah, you're going to have problems.
huge problem.
Huge problem, yeah.
So we're talking about crane footing.
Crane footing, yeah.
And we're focusing this deep dive for people who are crane operators already, people who are looking to recertify, and folks who are just thinking about getting into the field.
It's really for anyone who's going to be on a job site where they're operating around cranes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
This was actually brought to our attention by Safety One Source, and shout out to them for this.
They're a great resource.
Yeah, they really are. They know how vital a stable base is for, safe crane operation.
Yeah, you can't overstate that.
So can you give us the big picture here? Why is crane footing so crucial?
Well, cranes are these incredibly powerful machines. They can lift, tons and tons of material.
Yeah.
But all that power comes with a responsibility. And that responsibility is to manage that power safely. And when we talk about crane footing, what we're really talking about is stability.
Okay, so it's really all about making sure that the crane is stable and not going to tip over.
Exactly. If the ground beneath the crane isn't solid and level, well, you're just asking for trouble.
That makes sense. So how do we make sure that the crane is on solid ground?
Well, that's where the 1% rule comes in.
The 1% rule.
Yeah, the 1% rule, it's a key safety requirement. And Safety One Source actually highlighted this in their materials.
So tell me, what does that mean, the 1% rule, like in real world terms?
So basically it means that the crane's footing needs to be level within a 1% grade.
1%.
So that doesn't sound like a lot.
It doesn't sound like much, right?
No.
But when you consider the weight of a crane and the loads that it's handling, even a slight slope can make a huge difference.
It can create a really significant imbalance, and that increases the risk of, tipping or even a collapse.
Okay, so we're not talking about parking a crane on the side of a mountain here.
No.
But even a small incline can matter.
Even the tiniest incline can be a problem.
Wow. And I'm sure you've probably seen situations where maybe, a surface looked level.
Oh, yeah.
But it actually wasn't.
All the time. One time we were setting up a crane on what looked like totally flat ground. To the naked eye, it looked perfectly flat.
Yeah.
But as we started to do the leveling, we realized there was this really subtle depression, almost imperceptible.
Really?
Yeah. It had formed over time because of drainage, the way the water flowed off the site. And it turned out that the slope was way beyond that 1% threshold.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we had to bring in a bunch of extra material to build up the low side.
Just to make sure that it was level.
Yeah. To ensure a stable base,
That makes total sense.
You got to get it right.
So I know that they mention using things like timbers and cribbing to create this solid foundation.
Right.
Can you explain how those work together to make sure that the crane is on, a good base?
So basically what you're doing is you're building like a giant platform for the crane to stand on, and this platform has to be strong and level. So the timbers, those are these big, thick pieces of lumber, really heavy-duty stuff.
Got it.
And cribbing is basically a technique of stacking and interlocking those timbers.
Okay.
You create this incredibly solid base, and it's really important because this base helps to distribute the crane's weight evenly.
Okay.
So it doesn't, sink or shift.
So it's kind of like you're creating level ground, even if it doesn't exist naturally.
Exactly. It's like a giant customizable Lego set for cranes.
I like that.
Yeah. You got to get creative sometimes.
For sure.
Sometimes you might be working on soft soil and you need even bigger timbers or even steel plates to spread the load, Yeah. Or you might have to get creative with the cribbing arrangement to deal with uneven terrain. It's all about problem solving.
Yeah. So you're telling me it takes a lot of skill and experience.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's a combination of knowing your materials, understanding the physics, and being able to really assess those ground conditions,
That makes sense. So for our listeners out there who are aspiring crane operators or maybe going through recertification, what would you say is the biggest takeaway here?
Honestly, never underestimate crane footing.
Yeah.
It's not just about checking a box on a safety checklist. It's about understanding that you're responsible for the stability of this massive machine and the safety of everyone around you.
That's a big responsibility.
It is, and you got to take it seriously.
So always take the time to assess the ground conditions, get the right materials, and build a base that's rock solid.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, hey, great advice. Thanks again to Safety One Source for bringing this up.
Yeah, they're a great resource.
Yeah, and for everyone listening out there, remember knowledge is power, but in the world of cranes, it's also safety.
Stay safe out there.
We'll catch you next time.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.